Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Meridian, watching the blue marble of Earth slowly rotate beneath them. The space station's massive bulk cast shadows across the planet's surface, a testament to humanity's reach into the cosmos. She sipped her coffee, the bitter warmth a small comfort in the sterile environment of the orbital facility. The morning briefing had been routine. Supply runs to the outer colonies, maintenance schedules for the defense grid, and the usual political posturing from the various Earth governments about resource allocation. Nothing that suggested this would be the last normal day humanity would know for quite some time. Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief science officer, approached her with a data pad clutched in his weathered hands. His usually calm demeanor seemed strained, and Sarah noticed the slight tremor in his fingers as he handed her the device. "Captain, we're detecting some unusual readings from the Proxima Centauri sector," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Long-range sensors picked up what appears to be a massive energy signature moving in our direction." Sarah frowned as she studied the data. The readings showed a fleet of unknown vessels, their energy signatures unlike anything in the human database. The ships were enormous, some measuring over 5 kilometers in length, and they were moving at velocities that should have been impossible for vessels of that size. "How long until they reach our solar system?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "At current trajectory and speed, approximately 72 hours, Webb replied. "Captain, there's something else. We've lost contact with the Kepler 442b colony. Their last transmission was cut off mid-sentence." The coffee cup slipped from Sarah's fingers, shattering on the deck plating. Kepler 442b housed over 50,000 colonists, families who had made the dangerous journey to establish humanity's furthest outpost. The colony had been humanity's pride, a beacon of hope in the vast darkness of space. Within minutes, the station's command center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers scrambled to their positions as alarms blared throughout the facility. Sarah took her place at the central command console, her mind racing through protocols that had never been designed for this scenario. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," she ordered. "Priority Alpha clearance." The massive holographic display at the front of the command center flickered to life, showing the stern face of Admiral James Morrison, head of Earth's Unified Defense Command. His silver hair was perfectly groomed despite the early hour in his time zone, but Sarah could see the tension in his weathered features. "Captain Chen, we're receiving your telemetry now," Morrison said without preamble. "Our deep space arrays have confirmed multiple contact points throughout the outer systems. Whatever these things are, they're not here for a friendly chat." Sarah's stomach dropped as more reports flooded in. The Titan mining facility had gone dark. The Europa Research Station's automated distress beacon was transmitting before falling silent. One by one, humanity's outposts were disappearing from the communication grid like candles being snuffed out. "Sir, what are our orders?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Prepare for full defensive posture. All Earth-based fleets are being mobilized, but you're our first line of contact. We need to know what we're dealing with." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation and mounting dread. The Meridian's complement of 1,200 personnel worked around the clock to ready their defenses. The station's primary function had been research and coordination, not warfare, but it mounted a respectable array of plasma cannons and missile batteries. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, the station's tactical officer, approached Sarah with grim news. "Captain, we've managed to intercept some transmissions from the approaching fleet. Our xenolinguistics team has been working on translation." He activated a recording that filled the command center with an alien voice. The words were translated into text on the display, each syllable dripping with cold malice. "Inferior creatures of the third planet. Your species has expanded beyond your designated boundaries. You have contaminated sacred worlds with your presence. The hegemony has decreed your extinction. Surrender your pathetic vessels and your deaths will be swift." Silence fell over the command center like a heavy blanket. Sarah felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on her, looking for guidance in the face of the unthinkable. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was a nightmare. "Ma'am," Communications Officer Patel called out, her voice shaking. "We're receiving similar transmissions across all frequencies. They're broadcasting to every human settlement simultaneously. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. When she opened them, her voice carried the authority of someone who had accepted an impossible burden. Send a response on all channels. Tell them that humanity does not surrender. Tell them that if they want our worlds, they'll have to take them from our cold, dead hands. The alien response came within minutes. The first ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system like metal thunderclouds gathering for a storm. Long-range sensors showed vessels that dwarfed anything in the human fleet, their hulls gleaming with an ominous purple energy that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Earth Command's hastily assembled fleet moved to intercept, a collection of military vessels, converted cargo haulers, and even civilian ships whose crews had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Admiral Morrison himself took command of the flagship Defiance, leading humanity's first and, possibly last stand against an alien threat. Sarah watched the battle unfold on the holographic display, her heart breaking with each blue dot that winked out of existence. The human ships fought with desperate courage, their crews knowing they were vastly outmatched but refusing to yield. Plasma fire lit up the void between worlds as humanity threw everything they had at the approaching menace. But it wasn't enough. The alien weapons tore through human shields like tissue paper, their ships shrugging off torpedo strikes that should have crippled them. One by one, Earth's defenders were systematically destroyed, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. Captain, Webb's voice cut through her despair. We're detecting massive energy buildup from the alien flagship. It appears to be charging some kind of superweapon. The weapon fired a beam of pure energy that reached across the void to strike Earth's primary orbital defense platform. The platform, home to 20,000 personnel, simply ceased to exist in a flash of brilliant light. The energy beam continued its deadly arc, striking the moon's military installations and reducing them to glowing craters. Sarah's hands clenched into fists as she watched humanity's carefully constructed defenses crumble. Earth's surface was now visible on the display, its blue oceans and green continents suddenly seeming fragile and vulnerable. All remaining ships, this is Admiral Morrison, came a transmission from the Defiance. The flagship was badly damaged, atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches. We cannot stop them. All vessels are to fall back to Earth's atmosphere. Make them fight for every meter. The retreat was a fighting withdrawal, human ships sacrificing themselves to buy precious minutes for their homeworld. Sarah could only watch as the Defiance itself was bracketed by alien fire, its hull buckling under the assault. This is Admiral Morrison to all Earth forces, came the final transmission. Tell our people we fought with honor. Tell them the communication cut off as the flagship exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. James Morrison, veteran of 3 colonial wars and defender of humanity, was gone. Along with him died Earth's last hope of stopping the alien advance. The invasion of Earth began at dawn, Greenwich Mean Time. The alien ships descended through the atmosphere like fallen angels, their weapons carving great swaths of destruction across the surface. Cities that had stood for millennia were reduced to rubble in minutes. London, Paris, Tokyo, New York, all fell beneath the alien onslaught. From the Meridian, Sarah and her crew could only watch in horror as their homeworld burned. The aliens weren't interested in conquest or occupation. This was extermination, pure and simple. They swept across continents with methodical precision, their ground forces hunting down survivors with ruthless efficiency. The death toll mounted with sickening speed. Initial reports spoke of millions dead, then tens of millions. Communication networks collapsed as infrastructure was systematically destroyed. The last transmission from Earth Command came from a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. This is General Harrison, acting commander of Earth Defense Forces. The surface has fallen. Orbital bombardment continuing across all major population centers. Estimated casualties. The voice paused, and Sarah could hear the weight of grief in those words. Estimated casualties exceed 100 million and rising. All remaining forces are ordered to evacuate surviving populations to the outer colonies. Earth is lost. The transmission ended with the distinctive whine of alien energy weapons. General Harrison and his command staff joined the growing list of the dead, their sacrifice buying a few more minutes for the scattered survivors. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her homeworld die. The blue marble that had birthed humanity was being systematically sterilized, its cities reduced to radioactive craters. The aliens worked with the efficiency of an extermination team, showing no mercy for the billions of human lives they were snuffing out. But, even in the depths of despair, something stirred within the human survivors. Scattered across a dozen star systems, the remnants of humanity's colonies began to organize. The miners of Asteroid Belt Station Alpha welded armor plating onto their industrial haulers. The scientists of Mars began converting atmospheric processors into weapons of war. The farmers of the outer worlds turned their agricultural compounds into military bases. Dr. Webb approached Sarah with another datapad, his face grim but determined. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from the surviving colonies. They're requesting immediate military assistance and coordination." Sarah wiped away her tears and straightened her shoulders. Earth might be lost, but humanity endured. Somewhere in the cold equations of war, there had to be a way to make the aliens pay for what they had done. "Open a channel to all surviving human settlements," she ordered. "Let them know that the Meridian is assuming coordination of all defensive efforts. Tell them that Earth has fallen, but humanity has not." As her words echoed across the void to reach the scattered remnants of her species, Sarah began to formulate a plan. The aliens had shown their hand, they were powerful, but they had also revealed weaknesses. Their ships were large and heavily armed, but they moved slowly. Their weapons were devastating, but required significant charging time between shots. Most importantly, they had underestimated humanity's capacity for survival and adaptation. The aliens thought they were dealing with a primitive species that would collapse after losing their homeworld. They didn't understand that humanity had been forged in the crucible of 1,000 conflicts, that they possessed a stubborn refusal to yield even in the face of impossible odds. The war for humanity's survival was just beginning, and Sarah Chen intended to make sure the aliens learned why her species had clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain. They might have won the first battle, but the war was far from over. In the depths of space, the scattered children of Earth began to gather their strength, planning their revenge against the monsters who had murdered their world. The aliens called themselves the Hegemony and claimed dominion over the galaxy. They were about to learn that humanity had a different perspective on the matter. The 100,000 dead of that first terrible day would not be forgotten. Their sacrifice would become the foundation upon which humanity would build its response. And, when that response came, it would be delivered with compound interest. 6 months had passed since Earth fell silent. 6 months since Captain Sarah Chen had watched her homeworld burn from the observation deck of the UES Meridian. The space station now served as the de facto headquarters for what remained of humanity's military forces, a position it had never been designed to fulfill. Commander Torres stepped into the briefing room, his weathered face bearing the marks of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. The man who had once been a simple cargo pilot now commanded the largest remaining human fleet, a ragtag collection of converted civilian vessels and military survivors that humanity had christened the Ghost Fleet. "Status report," Sarah said without looking up from the tactical displays that dominated the room's central table. The holographic projection showed the current positions of every known human settlement, their defensive capabilities, and the last known locations of hegemony forces. "We've completed integration of the Martian industrial complex refugees," Torres replied. "Their engineering teams have been working around the clock with our people to upgrade the fleet's weapons systems. The results are promising." Sarah finally looked up, noting the cautious optimism in his voice. "Define promising." Torres activated a new display showing technical specifications that made Sarah's eyes widen. They'd managed to reverse engineer fragments of hegemony technology recovered from the Earth battle. "We now have working prototypes of plasma pulse cannons and energy shields. Not as powerful as the alien versions, but enough to give us a fighting chance." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the brilliant physicist who had led the reverse engineering effort, entered the briefing room with her arms full of data tablets. Her hair was disheveled and her lab coat stained with various chemicals, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. "We've made another breakthrough," she announced without preamble. Analysis of the energy signatures from hegemony ships reveals a critical vulnerability in their shield systems. They operate on a specific frequency that creates harmonic resonance points every 2.7 seconds. If we can time our attacks precisely, we can punch through their defenses. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. How many ships would we need to coordinate such an attack? Minimum of 12 vessels firing in perfect synchronization, Elena replied. The timing has to be exact to the microsecond, but our computer systems can handle the calculations. The door to the briefing room slid open again, admitting Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, formerly Dr. Webb of the Meridian Science Department. The soft-spoken researcher had transformed himself into a hardened military strategist, his scientific mind now focused entirely on the problem of alien extermination. We've received intelligence from the Kepler colony survivors, he reported. They've been hiding in the outer asteroid belt for months, conducting reconnaissance on hegemony operations. The news is both better and worse than we expected. Sarah gestured for him to continue, though she dreaded what she might hear. The good news is that the hegemony isn't as numerous as we initially believed. Our estimates suggest their total fleet consists of approximately 300 vessels of various sizes. They've spread themselves across multiple star systems to maintain control of their new territory. And the bad news? Torres asked. They're systematically exterminating every trace of human presence they can find. The colonies they've conquered aren't being occupied, they're being sterilized. Complete biological cleansing of all native life forms. They're turning our worlds into empty rocks. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't conquest in any traditional sense. The hegemony wasn't interested in slaves or resources or strategic advantage. They wanted every trace of humanity erased from existence. Sarah's jaw tightened as she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. Then, we give them exactly what they're trying to give us: extinction. No quarter, no mercy, no prisoners. This is a war of survival, and only one species is walking away from it. Over the following weeks, the Ghost Fleet began to take shape as something more than a collection of desperate refugees. The converted civilian vessels were reinforced with salvaged armor plating and fitted with the new hybrid weapons systems. Mining ships became missile platforms, cargo haulers transformed into carriers for fighter squadrons, and research vessels evolved into electronic warfare platforms. The transformation wasn't just technological, it was psychological. The scattered survivors of humanity's greatest catastrophe were becoming something harder, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous. They had learned to live with loss, to function despite grief, and to channel their rage into cold precision. Captain Maria Santos commanded the converted asteroid miner New Hope, her crew a mix of former miners, escaped colonists, and military survivors. The ship's massive drilling arrays had been replaced with banks of plasma cannon, turning a humble industrial vessel into an instrument of revenge. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, her sensor operator called out. Configuration matches hegemony destroyer class. Range approximately 50,000 kilometers. Santos felt her pulse quicken. This would be the Ghost Fleet's first real test, a coordinated attack against a single enemy vessel using their new tactics and technology. 12 ships spread across a wide formation, each one carefully positioned to exploit the timing vulnerability that Dr. Vasquez had discovered. All ships, this is New Hope Actual, she transmitted on the encrypted channel. Commence attack pattern Delta on my mark. Remember, timing is everything. Our people are counting on us to show these bastards that humanity doesn't go quietly. The hegemony destroyer moved through space with the arrogant confidence of a predator that had never encountered effective resistance. Its purple energy fields pulsed with malevolent power, and its massive hull bristled with the weapons that had laid waste to Earth's greatest cities. But the crew of that destroyer had never faced humans who had learned to fight like humans, with cunning, adaptability, and a complete disregard for conventional military doctrine. Mark! Santos shouted. 12 ships fired as one, their plasma bursts timed to hit the destroyer at the exact moment its shields reached harmonic resonance. The alien vessel's energy barriers flickered and collapsed under the perfectly coordinated assault, leaving its hull exposed to the follow-up barrage. The destroyer's crew tried desperately to respond, but they had been trained to fight primitive species that relied on brute force rather than precision timing. Their return fire scattered across space as the human ships executed evasive maneuvers that their computer systems had deemed impossible for vessels of their size and configuration. Within minutes, The Hegemony destroyer was drifting dead in space, its hull cracked open and venting atmosphere. The Ghost Fleet's first victory was complete, but, more importantly, they had proven that the aliens were not invincible. "This is Meridian to all vessels," came Sarah's voice over the communication system. "Outstanding work. Retrieve all useful materials from the target and prepare for immediate departure. We've sent a message today, but they'll be coming for us in force very soon." The salvage operation yielded a treasure trove of alien technology and intelligence. Hegemony computer systems contain star charts showing the locations of their fleet deployments, communication protocols, and, most crucially, the coordinates of their primary staging areas. Dr. Vasquez worked feverishly to decode the captured data, her team of scientists and engineers pushing themselves to their limits. What they discovered changed everything. The Hegemony home fleet is concentrated around an artificial construct in the Wolf 359 system, she announced during the next strategy briefing. It appears to be some kind of mobile command base, a massive space station that serves as their operational headquarters. Sarah studied the holographic representation of the alien construct, noting its enormous size and heavy defensive installations. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Approximately 60% of their remaining fleet," Elena replied. "They've pulled forces from across their territory to protect this facility. If we could find a way to strike at it, we'd cripple their command and control capabilities," Torres finished. "But how do we get close enough? That many ships would detect our approach long before we reached weapons range." The solution came from an unexpected source. Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison, a former demolitions expert who had lost his entire family when Earth fell, approached the command staff with a proposal that was either brilliant or completely insane. "We used their own strategy against them," he said, spreading technical diagrams across the briefing table. "The Hegemony moves through space using some kind of dimensional fold technology. We've detected the energy signatures every time one of their fleets appears. If we can reverse engineer that technology and modify it, we could appear inside their defensive perimeter without warning," Sarah realized. "But the power requirements would be enormous. We'd need to drain the engines of half the fleet just to fold a dozen ships across that distance." "Then, we make it count," Morrison replied grimly. "One strike, maximum damage, and we disappear before they can respond. Hit them where it hurts most and show them that nowhere is safe." The plan that emerged was audacious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. 12 of their most powerful ships would be equipped with experimental fold drives and launched in a surprise attack against the Hegemony's nerve center. The remaining fleet would launch simultaneous strikes against isolated alien forces throughout the sector, stretching their response capabilities to the breaking point. Preparation took weeks of intensive work. The hybrid fold drives consumed massive amounts of power and required precise calibration to prevent catastrophic failure. The attack ships were stripped of all non-essential systems and loaded with every weapon the Ghost Fleet could manufacture. Captain Chen selected the crews personally, choosing volunteers who understood they were unlikely to return from the mission. Among them was Chief Morrison, whose expertise with explosives would be crucial if they managed to breach the alien station's defenses. "This is suicide," Torres observed as they watched the final preparations. "No," Sarah replied. "Suicide is giving up. This is taking the fight to them on our terms. The Hegemony thinks they can exterminate us like vermin. It's time to show them what vermin can do when they're cornered." The night before the attack, Sarah stood once again on the observation deck of the Meridian, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so peaceful and welcoming. Earth was out there somewhere, a dead world orbiting a dying sun, but it was no longer home. Home was wherever humanity gathered to continue their species' story. Dr. Webb joined her, his expression thoughtful. "The crew is calling it Operation Payback," he said quietly. "I thought you should know." Sarah nodded. It was an appropriate name. Humanity had accumulated a debt of blood that stretched across the galaxy, and tomorrow they would begin collecting payment. The attack ships departed at 0600 hours, ship time, their fold drives charging as they moved away from the main fleet. Long-range sensors tracked their progress until they vanished into dimensional space, carrying humanity's fury across the void toward an enemy that had never known defeat. What followed would be remembered as the moment when humanity stopped running and started hunting. The hegemony had awakened something ancient and terrible in the human spirit, the capacity for total war waged without mercy or restraint. They were about to learn that genocide was a game that two species could play, and humanity had been practicing for a very long time. The dimensional fold drive tore reality apart and stitched it back together in the span of a heartbeat. Captain Sarah Chen felt her stomach lurch as the Meridian's revenge materialized in normal space, her sensors immediately screaming warnings about the massive alien construct that dominated the viewscreen. The hegemony command station was even more imposing than the intelligence reports had suggested. Stretching over 50 kilometers in length, the artificial structure pulsed with malevolent energy, its surface bristling with weapon emplacements and docking bays for the alien fleet. Purple lightning danced across its hull, and the space around it writhed with defensive energy fields. All ships, commence attack pattern immediately, Sarah commanded over the tactical channel. We have approximately 4 minutes before their response fleet can organize. Make every shot count. The 12 ships of Operation Payback spread into attack formation, their hybrid weapons systems powering up for what everyone knew would be humanity's most desperate gamble. These weren't military vessels built for warfare, they were converted civilian ships crewed by refugees and survivors, held together by determination and grief. But they carried something the hegemony had never encountered before, the focused rage of a species that had nothing left to lose. The New Brisbane, commanded by former cargo hauler Captain Maria Santos, opened fire first. Her ship's converted mining lasers carved deep gouges in the alien station's hull, sending cascades of sparks and debris into space. The weapon that had once carved asteroids apart now delivered humanity's fury with surgical precision. Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison's vessel, the Earth's Vengeance, followed with a barrage of nuclear-tipped torpedoes. The warheads had been modified with hegemony technology, their yields increased tenfold. They struck the station's primary power distribution center in a chain of brilliant explosions that lit up the void like newborn stars. The alien station shuddered under the assault, its energy fields flickering as power conduits overloaded. Emergency klaxons wailed across the hegemony communication frequencies, their alien voices rising in panic and confusion. For the first time in their species' history, they were under attack in what they had considered their inviolable sanctuary. Target the communication arrays, Sarah ordered, watching as Dr. Vasquez's precise calculations played out in real time. Cut off their ability to coordinate a response. The scientific method, ironically named by its crew of former researchers, unleashed a focused barrage of plasma bursts that severed the station's primary antenna arrays. The massive structures tumbled away into space, taking with them the hegemony's ability to coordinate their scattered fleet. But the aliens were far from helpless. The command station's defensive systems came online with devastating efficiency, massive energy cannons swiveling to track the human attackers. The return fire was accurate and overwhelming. The first barrage reduced the colonial spirit to expanding plasma and scattered debris. Rodriguez is gone, came the report from the Titan's hammer. Direct hit to their engine core. They didn't have time to eject. Sarah felt the familiar pang of loss, but there was no time for grief. Captain Rodriguez and his crew of 37 had volunteered for this mission knowing the odds. Their sacrifice would not be wasted. All ships, concentrate fire on the primary reactor complex, she commanded. Chief Morrison, your demolitions package is our primary objective. Get as close as you can. The Earth's Vengeance accelerated toward the alien station, its hull glowing from the heat of multiple energy weapon hits. Morrison's crew had reinforced their ship's forward sections with every piece of armor they could find, turning their vessel into a guided projectile aimed at the heart of hegemony power. Vengeance to all ships, came Morrison's voice over the calm, strained but determined. Beginning final approach. It's been an honor serving with you all. The ship's engines flared to maximum burn as Morrison guided his vessel through the station's defensive fire. Energy beams lanced through space around them, some missing by mere meters. The Earth's Vengeance took hit after hit, its armor plating ablating away under the alien barrage. Sarah watched in tense silence as Morrison's ship approached the reactor complex. The demolitions package he carried represented months of work by humanity's best engineers, a hybrid device that combined human nuclear technology with reverse-engineered hegemony power systems. If it functioned as designed, it would create a cascade failure that would destroy the entire station. Delivery in 30 seconds, Morrison reported. Looks like we've got company. Hegemony fighters were launching from the station's docking bays, their sleek forms moving to intercept the human attack ships. The alien pilots were skilled and their vessels fast, but they had never faced opponents who fought with such desperate ferocity. The asteroid miner's Pride broke formation to engage the fighters, its mining ship heritage evident in the way it maneuvered like a moving mountain. Captain Yuki Tanaka had lost her entire family in the Earth bombardment, and she piloted her ungainly vessel with the precision of a surgeon and the fury of a berserker. "Come on, you purple bastards," she shouted over the calm as her ship's point defense systems engaged the alien fighters. "Let's dance!" The Pride's weapons were designed to break apart asteroids, not engage nimble fighters, but Tanaka used her ship's mass as a weapon. She rammed her vessel through a formation of alien fighters, her reinforced hull crushing their sleek forms like insects. The tactic was suicidal, but it cleared the way for Morrison's final approach. 10 seconds to target, Morrison reported. "Tell everyone back home that Earth has been avenged." The Earth's vengeance struck the reactor complex at full velocity, its demolitions package detonating in a chain reaction that propagated through the station's power systems. The explosion started small, just another flash in the cosmic darkness, but it grew with geometric progression as it consumed the alien technology. Sarah watched in awe as the Hegemony command station began to tear itself apart from within. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull as power conduits overloaded and ammunition storage areas ignited. The massive structure that had coordinated the genocide of humanity was dying, taking with it the aliens' ability to wage organized warfare. But the victory came at a price that made Sarah's heart ache. Of the 12 ships that had begun Operation Payback, only 6 remained functional. The Colonial Spirit, the Earth's Vengeance, the Asteroid Miner's Pride, the Terra Nova, the Free Mars, and the Kepler's Hope were gone, their crews added to the ever-growing list of humanity's honored dead. All remaining ships, immediate withdrawal, Sarah ordered as the station's death throes sent massive debris chunks tumbling through space. "Our work here is done." The surviving ships activated their fold drives and vanished back into dimensional space, leaving behind a scene of devastation that would echo through hegemony space for generations. The command station's destruction had severed communication with dozens of alien fleets, leaving them isolated and vulnerable to human counterattack. The return journey to the Ghost Fleet's staging area passed in stunned silence. The crews who had survived humanity's most desperate gamble could barely believe they were still alive. They had struck at the very heart of alien power and lived to tell the tale. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Meridian's Revenge, watching the stars whirl past as they traveled through folded space. The tactical display showed the immediate aftermath of their attack. Hegemony forces throughout the sector were in chaos, their coordination shattered and their command structure crippled. But, more importantly, long-range sensors were detecting something else. Human ships, emerging from hidden bases throughout the outer systems. The colonies that had survived the initial onslaught were finally mobilizing, inspired by the Ghost Fleet's example and emboldened by proof that the aliens could be defeated. When they emerged from Dimensional Fold near the fleet staging area, Sarah was greeted by a sight that brought tears to her eyes. The ragtag collection of ships that had constituted humanity's last hope had grown into a proper fleet. Vessels from a dozen different worlds had joined the cause, bringing with them crews hungry for revenge and cargo holds full of weapons and supplies. Commander Torres met her in the docking bay, his weathered face split by the first genuine smile she had seen from him in months. "Ma'am, I think you need to see this. We've been receiving transmissions from throughout human space. The word of our victory is spreading faster than we could have hoped." The communications center was alive with activity as messages poured in from across the galaxy. Human settlements that had been hiding in asteroid belts and outer system installations were revealing themselves, offering their resources to the growing rebellion. The hegemony's reign of terror had created something they never expected: unity among their intended victims. Dr. Vasquez approached with a datapad containing intelligence gathered from the destroyed command station. Her expression was grim, but there was satisfaction in her voice as she delivered her report. "We've broken their communication codes and accessed their strategic databases," she said. "The good news is that the hegemony is in complete disarray. Without their central command authority, their fleet commanders are operating independently and making critical errors." "And the bad news?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. they're getting desperate. Some of their commanders are abandoning strategic objectives and focusing purely on extermination. They're destroying everything in their path, even worlds that have no strategic value. It's becoming genocide for its own sake. Sarah nodded grimly. The hegemony had revealed their true nature. They were not conquerors seeking territory or resources. They were exterminators driven by alien logic that saw other species as an affront to their dominance. Such enemies could never be negotiated with or deterred by shows of force. They had to be destroyed utterly. Then, we give them what they're trying to give us, she said quietly. Total extinction. No mercy, no quarter, no survivors. This ends only when one of our species is extinct. Over the following months, the character of the war changed dramatically. The scattered human forces launched coordinated attacks against isolated hegemony fleets, using their mobility and technological adaptability to devastating effect. Ships designed for mining became troop transports, research vessels transformed into electronic warfare platforms, and cargo haulers evolved into missile carriers. But the humans were learning to fight like humans, with cunning rather than honor, innovation rather than tradition, and a complete willingness to embrace tactics that their enemies would consider dishonorable. They used captured alien technology to build weapons the hegemony had never imagined, turned the aliens' own ships against them, and showed a talent for psychological warfare that terrified their opponents. The tide of war began to turn as human ingenuity met alien arrogance. Hegemony fleets that had swept aside primitive defenses found themselves outmaneuvered by converted civilian vessels. Alien commanders trained in formal military doctrine discovered that humans fought without regard for established rules of engagement. Most importantly, humanity had learned to see the war for what it truly was, not a conflict between rival powers, but a struggle for survival between incompatible forms of life. The hegemony could not coexist with other intelligent species, and therefore they had to be eliminated before they could eliminate anyone else. The final confrontation came at the hegemony homeworld, a massive planet orbiting a dying red giant star. The surviving alien fleets had gathered there for a last stand, their ships forming defensive formations around the world that had spawned their species. Sarah Chen, now promoted to admiral and commanding a fleet of over 200 human vessels, stood on the bridge of the Terra Remembers as her armada prepared for the final battle. The ship's name reflected humanity's new philosophy: they would never forget what had been done to them, and they would never allow it to happen again. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, she broadcast to the assembled fleet. Today we finish what they started when they murdered our world. Today we ensure that no other species will ever suffer as we have suffered. Today we end the hegemony forever. The battle that followed was less a military engagement than a cosmic execution. Humanity had spent 2 years learning to kill aliens efficiently, and they had become very good at their chosen profession. Advanced tactics, superior adaptability, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat combined to create a slaughter that echoed across the galaxy. When the last hegemony ship died in nuclear fire, Sarah felt no satisfaction, only weary completion. Humanity had paid a terrible price for survival, their innocence, their homeworld, and over 1 billion lives. But they had survived, and, in surviving, they had become something harder and more terrible than they had ever been before. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of threats that would see humanity as prey. The species that had once dreamed of peaceful exploration among the stars had learned a harder truth: sometimes the only way to ensure peace was to be so terrible in war that no one dared disturb it. As the human fleets spread out to claim the worlds their enemies had conquered, Sarah made a silent promise to the 100,000 who had died in those first terrible hours. Humanity would remember, humanity would endure, and humanity would never again be caught unprepared when the monsters came calling. The war was over, but the vigil had just begun.